Hey NAI football fans, Corey Thorpe here with another edition of the NAIFBALL podcast powered by AdCraft USA, your custom apparel, merch, and uniform experts. Our friends at AdCraft have been with us for many years now. They've run web stores for us multiple times. These guys are NAI fans and family who are experts in the apparel and merchandise world. AdCraft allows you to take the hassle out of ordering. Let their knowledgeable design and customer service staff handle everything from hosting the store online, shipping the product, and helping your customers so you can get back to the game. Find them online at adcraftusa.com. All right, guys, welcome on into the NAIF Ball podcast. You heard the ad read. We are powered by AdCraft, your custom apparel, merch, and uniform experts, putting out some really, really pretty content. They put out a laser engraving that was it was like ASMR for my eyes. You can see that I am Johnless tonight, and you may wonder who is the floating head next to me. That is the man, the myth, the legend, the intern, Matt Schwartzler. Matt, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, Corey. Thanks for having me on tonight. I'm really excited.
It's our pleasure. I mean, you do happen to be kind of our GPAC expert over here, seeing that, you do play in the GPAC. It does help.
This is true. I have a lot of good insight, whether I want to have it or not.
Yeah. So what we've been doing in the last, or the first couple of interviews, not interviews, previews here as we've been going, is kind of been going from the bottom to the top and start to do that and working on naming at the very end who we expect to win the division or conference and our dark horse, which doesn't necessarily have to be a pick to win the division or conference. It's just a pick to overachieve and defy
Gotcha.
expectations. So we are going to start up in South Dakota, Yankton to be exact, with the still winless Mount Marty Lancers. I got to say, they might not have a win, but I do love their uniforms.
They're pretty cool. As a college football fan in general, the Notre Dame thing they got going on, I don't mind it. They
I
got some good graphics to go with it too.
I totally dig it. The goldish thing. I love a good gold. I mean, call me a Florida State
Yeah.
fan, but I love a good gold. Now Mount
sure.
Marty was bottom in the GPAC offense and defense last year. They didn't even get 4 yards per play offensively, and they were almost giving up 7 per play defensively for a net yards per play of almost -3 yards. They do have one lone returning a GPAC player here in defensive back Dylan Capps, 49 tackles, 2 picks, and 3 pass breakups a year ago. Matt, what's the feeling out there on Mount Marty? Do you think they're going to get off the schneid this year?
I think so, and I think you can look at what they did last year as the first-year team. And granted, they didn't win a game, and obviously giving up almost twice as many yards as you're putting out is not a recipe for success. But those guys fight. They have a lot of heart. They have a good coaching staff put together. They were, a couple plays away from getting a couple wins on the board. Just seeing what they did last year, they got after it, and they got a lot of good athletes on that team. And obviously, being a first-year team in the GPAC of all conferences is pretty brutal. I'll probably reiterate this like a million times throughout the episode, but I'm very high on this conference. Obviously, I'm a little biased, but there's a lot of good teams and a lot of good competition at all levels. So I think they're close.
They really they it is really a tough conference, especially when you look at the top. And you do look and they were a score away from beating Briarcliff, a score away from beating Hastings, and a couple scores away from Midland um, and Dakota Wesleyan to open the season there. So, yeah, there's definitely some fighting. They return a lot of offensive skill pieces, and, like, literally, I didn't see a single senior on their defense when I was putting the show notes together. So, look, I mean, if you're some of these other bottom guys in the GPAC, whether it be Hastings, whether it be Briarcliff, you've really got to look out for, or Jamestown. Jamestown's on the way up to me. We'll get to them eventually. But if you're one of
Yes,
those
sir,
kind
yeah.
of bottom three teams there, you've really got to be looking out for Mount Marty because of their newness. They're going to be able to have a little bit more energy than a really, really established program's going to have, and you're going to have to watch out. They might bite you.
I think so. And I don't think that's even limited to the bottom three teams, like you said. And this is also a conference where the middle can just eat itself alive.
That is true.
Like teams beating each other all over the place, and the transitive property does not apply at all. If you thought it did, this conference is proof that it doesn't.
Yeah, I
So
mean Midland and Doane and Dakota Wesleyan, they're kind of that middle three. Will definitely beat up on each other.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's usually how it goes.
So moving over to Hastings. Hastings being kind of, I don't want to call them unique. I mean, yes, they are. They are the home of College Football Hall of Fame coach Tom Osborne. That's why the trophy is named the Tom Osborne Trophy, is
Makes
due to his
sense.
time at Hastings there in Nebraska. And I know we've got some stuff covering it up right there, but thank you so much to the fine folks over in Hastings for the fantastic picture. Guys, we're trying to get just as many of these as we can because, let's be honest, I like them. I like stadiums. I'm a nerd. So thank you to Hastings. Hastings actually had a halfway decent offense for being for being 2-8, 4 yards per play. If you get that out over 3 plays, yeah, it's first down. The
Yeah,
problem
it's pretty good.
was they were giving up 6 2/3 yards per play on defense. That's not a recipe for success.
No, not at all. But I do think offensively, the past few seasons, anyways, at least my 3 years I've played in the GPAC, they've always had good running backs. They've always been able to run the ball pretty well, which
That's
I
going to
think is
be
something they can stick to.
That's going to be interesting this year because they do lose Tyree Nesmith there, the running back position,
Hmm.
who scored 6 touchdowns, was running 5 yards a pop. And no all conference offensive linemen. So that kind of brings up the question of, all right, which one's going to give here? Is it going to be? Are you going to be able to bring in a good running back, or was it something that was more offensive line related and they just kind of did it as a unit, and no one stood out? You do return Kobe Brandenburg there on the
Hmm.
back half of your defense, and you're talking about a no-fly zone on his part of the field, 5 interceptions, 6 breakups. If you're going to his side of the field, you're not getting those 6 2/3 yards, I would imagine.
For sure.
But
For
but
sure.
they do return a lot of skill players, quarterbacks, wide receivers, most of their defense. There's just a lot of room for improvement, and so you kind of wonder at some of these other teams, whether it be Hastings, Briarcliff, Jamestown, who's going to be able to take that next step? Who's going to be able to, put it together, have enough institutional support to get it done and to, break through here? What do you think about Hastings?
They're always solid. I mean, you're gonna find me hard pressed to say a lot of bad things about the teams in this conference, especially because I'm still playing next season. So I don't want to
This
be the
is
one
true.
giving out bulletin board material. That's your job, Corey. So
Dang right.
you can stick to that, and I will be the good cop over here. But I I've always had a lot of respect for the way they do things offensively, especially a couple seasons ago in the season opener when we went down there and played them, and they absolutely rocked us by like 30, 40 plus points. I don't know if you remember that, but um, yeah, they have good coaches, and they always bring in good skill positions, like you said. They always have a solid running back. They always have good receivers that can make plays. It's just a matter of defensively for them, being able to put all the pieces together because they have the talent. And granted, like units need time to develop and all that. And I think they have the pieces. Most of the teams in this conference have the pieces. It's just a matter of pulling out those 50-50 games.
Yeah, I mean, let's say you put some of these teams in other conferences, whether it be the Sooner or whether it be uh, the even the Frontier or the North Star. These teams aren't going to be 2-win teams. Just looking at the stats here and just starting to compare conference to conference on those stats. I mean, you're looking next here at a Briarcliff team who won 3 games while, you know, giving up 6 1/3 yards per play, who returns a good receiving good receiver in Aaron Okoro, returns their quarterback, returns their running backs, most of their wide receivers, most of their defense. They're sitting there at 3-8 on the year.
Hmm.
It's hard, and
Yeah.
for Briarcliff, I wonder how much more difficult is life made for Briarcliff sharing a city with Morningside.
Yeah, that I'm glad you touched on that because that's definitely something worth noting. And I think they still make do with what they're given. They definitely use the portal. They do use transfers a bit more than Morningside does because I think it's kind of what you have to do as a program when you're recruiting against them within the same 5 minutes of each other.
Right.
Um, and I mean, naturally, because of that, they're a bit more susceptible to being up and down from year to year than a lot of other teams in the conference. But again, with that being said, having a good chunk of transfer guys that come in, a lot of chance for there to be, those diamond in the rough type of guys. And because of that, you see a lot of good athletes go through that program.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. The example that comes to mind in talking about this sort of in the same way really is the NBA. It's very rare to see the Clippers and the Lakers up at the same time.
Yeah.
It's very rare to see that together. I mean, even thinking about it in other ways, North Carolina Central and Duke are in two different divisions. Florida State, Florida A&M are in two different divisions of football. Trying to think
Hmm.
of some more off the top of my head, but I mean, I can't imagine playing in the same conference
Yeah.
as as a team in the same city. And we're going to touch on this more when we go to the Sun. And we talk about Florida Memorial and we talk about St. Thomas
Mhm.
and seeing that dichotomy there. Um, and those two teams are probably going to turn Miami Gardens into a have and have not scenario there at some point in their development. It's the same way here in Sioux Falls, Sioux Center, Sioux City. One of those Sioux
Sioux
places,
City.
Sioux City.
Yes.
I
There you
cannot
go.
keep the Sioux places.
There's a lot of them.
There's a lot of them, and it's the
Yeah.
Sioux River apparently. That's through there. That's where all these guys, all these cities are getting their names. And I
Yep.
apologize to all of those cities because I can never keep them straight. So going on is a team that while they're 2-9 and have not done much since we've started covering things, they start to catch my eye every now and again as being punching a little bit above their weight class and making teams really, really uncomfortable. And that's
I
the Jamestown Jimmies, the Pumpkin Heads.
Yeah, I could speak on making people sweat a little bit because if you remember this season, Corey, we were playing them. I play for Dakota Wesleyan, by the way, if you couldn't tell from all the blue I'm wearing, for all the viewers at home. Um, we were up. Oh gosh, it was like fourth quarter. Couldn't have been more than like 6 minutes left in the game. We are up 31-7, 31-3, something like that. Final score, Dakota Wesleyan wins. It was 31-25. Came down to a last play stop.
And I know you've told me before that Jamestown's head coach comes from really good pedigree.
Uh-huh. I'm a big fan of Coach Mistro's. He's probably, I mean, obviously I'm really close with Coach Simple. He's my head coach. But out of all the other coaches in the conference, I would say I know Mistro the best because he recruited me when he was out at Concordia Moorhead, which is a really solid D3 program out in Minnesota. Um, and he's a really good dude, and he's very outgoing. Um, Good guy. I'm a fan of his. You can tell though that the culture they're building over there, it's starting to pick up some steam. And like you said, that this is a team that catches your eye. This is a team that we'll probably get to it later because you said we're gonna do some dark horse picks. So I guess I'm giving mine away a bit here, but they they can do some things and they're competitive. They don't have quit in them. They're all bought in to their head coach who offensively, I mean, they do good things on offense. They bring in pretty decent quarterbacks. They have talented receivers who can make a lot of good plays. I mean, who knows what they can do next year, honestly. Like, and they make people sweat even if they're not turning a lot of those 50-50 games yet. I think they're still on the uptrend.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, look, you've got an offensive yards per play of 4.5 yards, which is going to be fairly solid.
Mm-hmm.
You can live with that. That's good for seventh in the GPAC, which just tells you just how crazy some of these other offenses are.
Yeah.
And on the defensive side, you're talking about 6.4 yards a play, which so you've got a little work to do there. You do return Jordan Olson on defense with his 6 interceptions, and that's a nice spot. But that is a combination of less than -2 net yards per play, and that's something that I think that they can live with. And they do return Torgerson at quarterback, and I really think that Coach Mistrom might have found his quarterback there. He did a really nice job handling the football. Only 8 picks as compared to 23 touchdowns. He's just a junior, so he's got another year. Almost threw for 3,000 yards
Mm-hmm.
there a year ago. It's a team that just they're that far from a breakout season.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing that you're going to have to replace is your punter. Honestly, Itzhak Miles was also the kicker, 3 of 4 on field goals,
Mm-hmm.
and as long as 66 punting, with one of the few 40-yard averages in the NAI. They returned their entire defense this year, and
Yeah.
so you've got a lot of pieces coming back. You've got to be salivating if you're Coach Mistro out there.
Mm-hmm.
And personally, I just love that they also call them the Pumpkin Heads. That is that's fantastic. They wear the orange lids better than the Cleveland Browns. Prove
Yeah,
me
I do
wrong.
have to admit I'm not a fan of orange as a color altogether on a uniform, but some teams can pull it off. I think Jamestown's one of them.
Yeah, I'm not either. Full disclosure, as a Florida State fan,
Yeah, that's kind
orange
of natural for
me and
you, but
orange just don't jive.
yeah, they don't go well together. I get that.
Next on the list is going to be it's going to hit a little close to home for you, man. That's going to be Dakota Wesleyan.
Yeah,
That's a team.
how about them?
That's a team that has had a lot of adversity over the last couple of years, and in 2021 still managed to almost break even on net yards per play. You've got a defense that this is the first one we talked about that's given up less than 6 yards per play and by a wide margin for the rest of them. And an offense that's almost getting 5 per pop. Talk
Hmm.
talk a little bit about your Tigers.
Yeah, so I mean, defensively, that was definitely the unit that led the team last year. I mean, you had Cody Reichelt, the linebacker. You had Sam Kretschmar, who was an honorable mention, I think. Dom Warmbine, who you have in the notes here, really good nose guard. I mean, defense is definitely the point of question for a lot of people when they look at this team. I can tell you from spring ball right now, there's a lot of new pieces in play. Our DB unit is pretty well versed still. A lot of guys are turning back there, but I think it's a unit that's going to be a lot more competitive than people expect because those guys get after it. They learned well from the guys above them. I'm really excited to watch them ball out. And on the offensive side of the ball, I mean, we are returning pretty much everybody, including TJ Benton, who was second team all conference. on the O-line anchor for that group. I mean, a lot of good stuff happening. I guess I don't want to give too much away because we still got a few months before kickoff here, but personally being involved, I'm super excited for the upcoming season. I mean, we got a lot of talented guys. We got a lot of new faces who I think are already prepared to take that next step in their role next season. And the past few seasons for us, it's been talking about, taking the next step, winning those 50-50 games, being able to get over the hump per se. Because I know last season, 4-7, I mean, any losing season isn't desirable. I mean, if we're technically speaking, any season that's not a national title, I guess, isn't as desirable as you'd like it to be. But you got to take steps before you can make leaps and bounds. So
I always say, and I always quote Bobby Bowden on this, when talking about a team's development. First, you lose big, then you lose small, then you win small, then you win big, and so that to me, when I'm looking at these NAIA teams nationally, as I see scores come in, and I see these close games and teams reaching up and biting somebody, I go, okay, I'm taking notice. I see what you're doing there. And let's see if you can string a couple of those together and make some nice eh, start to turn those into wins. And that's where you see you've got teams coming, uh, growing and coming into the forefront of a division.
mm-hmm.
So we've talked about these teams so far, whether it be Mount Marty, whether it be Dakota Wesleyan, or Jamestown, Hastings, Briarcliff. That's kind of your bottom half almost. If we want to make tiers out of this.
I mean, unfortunately, yes. Of course, I still have my rose-tinted glasses on. I kind of have to, considering I still play for the team.
You
Maybe
do.
in a couple of years I can come back and be a bit more unbiased, but I bleed blue, man. So that's just how it is.
Absolutely. So aside from the obvious there, where you're going to pick Dakota Wesleyan, I'll take them out of the picture. Of the other four teams, who's more likely to make the leap into the top half of the conference?
I would argue it's Jamestown. And granted, they also are on a trend. They recruit pretty nationally, at least compared to some of these other teams in the conference. Because no offense to North Dakota, because there's some great athletes that come out of North Dakota, but the talent is much fewer and far between than if you go to the coast, which is where they've recruited, or if you go to other parts of the Midwest like Minnesota, or you go to Colorado. There's there's more athletes out there, and that's where they've recruited, and that's where I think they're getting more talent from to buy into the vision that Mistro has.
There's also more people.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's kind of the given. I'm trying to be nice about it, so
that's all right.
Try to cater to our Great Plains viewers here.
My friends at Dickinson State will give me crap, I'm sure. And so now we kind of get into this middle section, and out of this middle section where we're going to talk about a Doane, Midland, Concordia, kind of those three together. Well, I'll save that for before we get to the top tier here. But those are kind of the three that I'm grouping together here as kind of your mid tier. Going from like Concordia 7-3 to Doane's 5-5. These are teams that are going to be really close to breaking even on net yards per play or slightly above. So starting with the Doane Tigers, who had a really good defense a year ago, 4.56 yards per play allowed, which was good for fourth in the division. But they are they're missing a lot of guys defensively next year that made that defense a really good squad.
Mm-hmm. I do specifically remember on our scouting report they had a lot of upperclassmen on that defensive side of the ball.
And so that's going to be the question here as we talk about the bottom portion. We're going to return to this. There might be a little bit of turnover in these two tiers here as some of these upperclassmen start to filter out. Maybe not as much at the top where you've got your Morningside, your Northwestern, your Dordt. I don't know that those teams are going anywhere. They've established some crazy good culture. I don't think
Those
that
teams reload.
yeah,
You
exactly.
can have as many guys leave as you want. They're always going to be able to bring in other talent developed guys.
And credit to Dort that when we started this was
Mhm.
not in that picture. Not at
No,
all. And they have developed that team. We'll get to that in a minute, but I do want to point that out. Now you're talking about Dort as a team that is in that top tier solidly. So if you're down here, you do return your running backs, your quarterbacks. D lineman Ty Barb is on there. You've got to get better offensively. You were eighth in the 11 team conference offensively. You've got to improve. Your defense has to be next man up here because you do
hmm
lose Riley Heithoff, Mason Krause, Damon Brown. Some really nice pieces out of your front seven that you're going to have to figure out where are you going to
yeah.
get those back.
I mean, defensively, you look at their linebackers. That's the position group I really look at because the past couple seasons that we've played them, and I was on the field for one of them. I had a knee injury last year, so wasn't able to get up close and personal with all these teams, unfortunately. But I remember a couple seasons ago, that linebacker unit was really, really good. And that stack defense they run is they've had the right guys in those spots for them. And I think losing two of those main pieces in your linebacker core is really, I mean, you're right. Like, how are you going to replace those guys? And I don't know, like, I guess I don't check up on everybody's rosters, so I don't know what they have behind them. But at the same time, those are guys that younger guys can learn from. So I don't think it's end of the world for them, but it is going to be interesting to see what guys come to the forefront of that defense next season.
And honestly, other than Morningside and Northwestern, we don't have 100% certainty who is leaving, who is staying. We just, at this point, COVID has made us say that out loud because we have to make these assumptions that
Mm-hmm.
if you had SR next to your name last season, you're probably not back. But, sometimes we're wrong. We're often wrong in that regard. But you talk about the linebacker position. I mean, especially in a conference like the GPAC, I'm thinking about the offenses of those top three squads. I mean, you've got to have really, really good linebackers. I mean, whether it's, obviously Morningside has the outstanding offensive line, has the outstanding running game, and has outstanding wide receivers that have traditionally loved to go over the middle.
Mm-hmm.
You've got Northwestern, who I'm not sure if Blake Fryer is going to be half the running threat that Tyson Coimo was, but by George, you've had a running attack there with your quarterback that gives
Mm-hmm.
defensive coordinators nightmares. And then that RPO game of Dort, you've got
Good
to have
old triple
good,
option.
yeah, you've got to have good linebackers to read and react. And so
Yeah.
that might be a problem for Doan this year.
Mm-hmm.
Then we go to Midland. Now, before last year, I had GPAC coaches telling me, "Hey, watch Midland this year." And you know, sure as God made little green apples, if I remember correctly, they gave Northwestern literally all they could handle.
Uh-huh.
And it's a team that had a good offense, 5.28 yards per play, and had a decent defense at 5.29 yards given up, basically even between the halves of that team there. They've just got a lot that's leaving, and I almost wonder if they might have maybe missed their opportunity to climb and up in the echelon of the GPAC and make their mark a little bit here before these seniors left.
Mm-hmm. Um, I think they also, maybe not quite as Briarcliff has had to adjust to using the transfer portal, to survive being in the same city as Morningside, but I think Midland too. In the past couple seasons, I could be incorrect, but I'm pretty sure they've also been a school that brings in a few decent transfer players. At least the past few seasons have, and I mean, especially with COVID, like who knows? I mean,
Yeah.
everybody's bringing in transfers now,
Right.
so I guess that statement's not very special to say anymore. But I guess more so than other teams, they are also a school that every year it seems like just has dogs on both sides of the ball. They have guys who could fly around and make plays and hit you in the mouth. And I mean, they're teams in the bottom half of the conference that just can't handle that. And like you said, they gave Northwestern a run for their money. And Northwestern is really, really, really good.
Yeah, I
It's
mean,
not easy to give that team trouble.
yeah,
So
I mean, Northwestern has now distanced themselves from a little bit of their playoff issues that they've had. You look at Northwestern, they've had what was it that I talked about with McCarty? It was like 3 losing seasons in the past like 50 years. So you're talking about a team with a lot of good football to their name. And so to give them trouble is definitely something good, but there's
it's
a
saying
lot.
something. Yeah.
There's a lot that's leaving, whether it be Kenneth Carr with 762 yards or whether it be Dalton Tremaine, who was their leading rusher from the wide receiver spot with 432 rush yards.
Mhm.
You lose a couple defensive linemen in Chase Lipsis and Trevor Havlovic, who combined for 110 tackles and 24 tackles for loss and 5 pass breakups on the defensive line. Talking about guys that get their hands into the passing lanes there.
Yeah, I know for a fact, speaking from experience, we have gotten yelled at on the sideline many times about them batting balls down. Specifically, Midland, I can remember, so I'm sure those guys had something to say about it.
Absolutely. And so they do return very few, even past their couple that are all conference. There are a lot of seniors on their Presto page on their lineup, and so really and truly, it's going to be very difficult for them to tread water. I think maybe this year, and if they do tread water this year, then we're going to be that's going to turn my head. In it just as much as Jamestown. If Jamestown goes 500, that's going to turn my head. If Midland can hold steady with losing as much as they have, that's going to make me kind of sit up and watch a little bit.
Yeah. I think they'll be able to, because like I said, they also they always have talent. I mean, again, I'm saying things that could probably be applied to a lot of teams, but they stand out to me as a team, especially being in the middle of the pack of the conference, as they always bring in talent and they always have guys. Granted, I don't know how deep they are. I think roster number wise, they have a lot of guys, but I'm pretty sure they also have a JV team if I'm not mistaken. I could be
A
wrong.
lot of these schools do it at this in this
Mhm.
conference do have JV squads.
Yeah. I mean, can't relate, but
Yeah,
and I don't know
right.
if that's not supposed to be a knock. I don't know. We've never had, 150 plus guys on a roster before, so we've never been able to do that.
Right.
But
There's pros
I
and
know that there are a
cons
lot
to
of
it.
teams that have a lot of bodies. So who knows who could come out of the woodworks for them.
So then we go to Concordia, and not the Cardinals. These are the Bulldogs. Always have to. It's Concordia and Bethel that always give everybody trouble.
It's a million Concordias and a million Bethels. Even if it's not in the NAI, it's just a nightmare.
The other one is Benedictines. I mean,
Oh yeah.
they're so Benedictine, Kansas is the only Benedictine in that plays football. But there's Benue Mesa out in Arizona that does some stuff, and I want to say there's one like up in the upper Midwest somewhere. But who knows?
Probably.
Getting back to it, Concordia, the Bulldogs they were receiving votes at times during the season for us, a 7-3 record. They're the first team that we are getting to right now that has had a positive net yards per play, and that's because of their defense. 4.27 yards allowed there. That is good for third in the conference. And that's led by Lane Napier, who had 134 flipping tackles. That's
Sure.
insane.
I mean, he's what, a 5-time all-conference guy now because of COVID?
That sounds about right.
Something crazy like that.
And he is leaving, so that's
Yeah.
a huge guy to have to replace. You also lose Kadron Cox, who added 55 tackles and 13 tackles for loss there.
Yep.
There's a lot that's leaving here for Concordia. Those are kind of most of what's leaving on the defense. They do return quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, the whole 9 yards. You do lose Garrett Sharp, SCHARDT, for those who are wondering. You know, can Concordia take that next step and become the next Dort?
I think they could. It is interesting that Garrett Shard, I'm going to emphasize the DT there for his own sake. He's leaving because he was a really solid tight end for them, and 500 yards. What is that? 5 touchdowns,
Yep.
15.8 yards per catch. Not only that, but he was really good in their run blocking game too. He was a big part of what they did offensively. And I think that offense gets going, and they're a scary team. I mean, you saw it in years past, like they were 7-3. They the year prior they started undefeated. I mean, they were in the top 25 for the first half of the season the year before, you know. So they are definitely a team that can get stuff done. And I think offensively, if you have the pieces there, I feel like their defense is never really in question, even with Lane Napier leaving.
Mm-hmm.
I still think they'll be okay. Their defense will probably look a bit different because a lot of what they did, at least from my memory, was catered towards what Lane could do. But that's not to say that the rest of their defense isn't capable. The rest of their defense is extremely capable. They are very good and they get after it. I think offensively, if you can have the pieces there, they are going to be a very competitive team again.
So now we're kind of at the end of this middle tier of teams here, and really to me the thing that separates these teams in my mind, just looking at them, these teams lose an absolute ton defensively.
Mm-hmm.
And so we alluded to it earlier. I said I'd get back to it. Now I am. Could you see some of these teams lose out and drop to that bottom tier and see a couple of the bottom tier teams take their spot just almost due to cycling of players?
I think it's a possibility. Like I said before, you never really know how outside of the top 3 or 4 teams how it's gonna go, honestly. Because somebody could be having an up year and a team could be having a down year, and it'll cycle all through. Um, it relies all on those 50-50 games. Like, are those teams going to have the personnel and the guys to be able to pull out those games against teams of similar caliber, maybe slightly below, maybe slightly above? It's and I don't think it's a given just because you lose a ton of guys that you're going to be done for. But also, this is definitely a conference where you need to have your guys. So I don't know. That really doesn't give anyone a clear answer, but it's also to say that anything can really happen. So I'm not saying a team's going to be set here. I'm not saying a team's going to set to drop in the next 3 years to the bottom of the conference. It's just to be aware, keep your eyes out the whole season because it's going to be chaos. Always is.
You talk about losing players, not making that huge difference there. And I think to me, the biggest example of that is honestly Dort. You in 2020 you lost Noah Clayberg.
Mm-hmm.
You lost that guy that was almost one of those eternal guys for you. It started it out at Iowa and then makes his way over to Dort. I know, crazy, right? He was a
Yeah.
Deckham, Iowa Hawkeye, for goodness sake.
Oh, trust me, I knew. I was well aware.
And so you might look at this and go, well, Corey is 7-3 and Dort's 7-3. Why do you put these in two different categories? Honestly, to me, it's all due to the stats in the history here. You saw that Concordia's net yards per play is a little under a half a yard per play net. Dort, you're now looking at almost at a little over 2 1/3 yards per play net. They had the second best offense in the conference, behind only Morningside, a better offense play to play than Northwestern, and had a decent defense to go along with it. Dort is a team that and like we said earlier, 3 years ago, Dort was not in this top section. It was Morningside and Northwestern and the rest. And Dort has made their way into this top section. And it's because they're hard to defend.
No, they are insanely difficult to defend. It's the offense they run, and everybody, oh, it's triple option, oh, it's this, oh, it's that. But they are really, really good at it. They don't have to do anything fancy because they are really good at what they do offensively. If you can nail an offensive system and have 10, 15 go-to plays, and you're really good at them, you're pretty set. And they are near perfection offensively. I mean, it is hard to find a weak link in how they do things on the offensive side of the ball.
And they're bringing back so much offensively. It's almost unfair.
Yeah.
Josh Bush with 594 yards and 6 touchdowns. Anthony Trojan with 774 rushing yards and 12 touchdowns. 2 all-conference offensive linemen in Walter Black and Alex Eisman.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, defensively, Jessup Leakey was an all-conference selection. Brayton Van Kekerix was an all-conference selection. Really, your big questions here are how do you look, you don't lose Jungling or Kabongo, really, because I think they both have coaching positions at Dort.
Mm-hmm.
At least one of them does. It's been 6 months since I've seen that news article, but Jungling was like there was absolutely their deep threat, almost 1,000-yard receiver, and
Oh, yeah.
Kabongo in their defensive backfield was their defensive quarterback. That's man, and they were third.
Yeah. And I think statistically, they're getting, I mean, like you said, they had the second best offense in the conference ahead of Northwestern, who, granted, Koima's hurt, but had the returning, National Player of the Year on their roster?
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah.
That's no easy task, especially with Fryer, because, I mean, we'll get to Northwestern next, but Fryer's also a really good quarterback, and that team is always super high-powered. It's not easy to outstat them.
So if you're Dort, I mean, now you've had a season of people having a target on your back. I think that might make it a little easier, and they still came within one score of beating Morningside. It was like I think it was like a late pick that cost them that game, and they also gave Northwestern a run for their money. Dort's in an interesting position. They could either very much take the next giant step and start, challenging Morningside and Northwestern for their playoff spots, or you could see a team that is a little bit of a left at the altar kind of team and is here some years and not here others. Time will tell how consistent they're going to be.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't that long ago that they were within the top, I don't know. They only had 2 losses a year or 2 ago and almost made the playoff, if I'm not mistaken.
2 years. So in 2020, they did make the playoffs. It
They
was
did. That's
yeah,
correct.
it was 3
Yeah,
GPAC teams for the
that's
first
right.
time in forever, which was insane.
Yeah. So I mean, they've already made their case that they're here and they're here to stay. And I think the way that coaching staff is operating, I mean, they got good guys
Mhm.
developing around there. They got all the players. They recruit well. I mean, they're going to be around for a while, I think.
Absolutely. But here's your problem. The
Mhm.
next 2 teams, and we'll
Yeah.
start with Northwestern.
That
I mean, we mentioned it earlier. 3 losing seasons in the past 50 years. Um,
it's not too shabby.
that's not too shabby at
Not
all.
too shabby.
Third in the conference with almost 6 and 2/3 yards per play. Second in defensive yards per play with just over 4, and a net yards per play of almost 2.5. And they bring back so freaking much. It's absurd. You lose Tyson Koima, yes. But now you've got Blake Fryer, who's played a half a season
He looks
with
pretty good.
and looks good. Matt McCarty told me a couple years ago that Blake Fryer lost 1 game in high school,
Hmm.
and it was to Tyson Koima.
Really? That's too funny.
And so it's, yeah, in the state championship to Tyson Koima. Fryer acquitted himself well in the national championship game against Lindsey Wilson. He acquitted himself nicely. Now look, he's not Tyson Koima. The man can run a little bit. He was positive on his rushing yards, scored a couple touchdowns, but the man is not Tyson Koima. I mean, there's not much you can say besides that. Koima was, when he was on the field, he was something special.
Hmm.
You know,
It's hard to follow that up, but I think also comparing Koima to Fryer definitely takes away from Fryer's ability to throw the ball because that
yeah.
kid can throw the ball.
And the good
Holy
news
crap.
and the good news for Fryer is that he gets Cade Mosier and Michael Story back.
Yeah.
That's 23, almost 2,400 receiving yards and
Mhm.
30 touchdown catches that you get back. Plus, you get Connor McQuillan and Logan Meyer, who ran for 1,300 yards and 20 touchdowns themselves.
I think something that interests me about Northwestern too, because everybody talks about their offense. I mean, they've had a good offense for forever, right? You said they were second
Hmm.
in defense, which is something that I don't think people talk about a whole lot. They had a really good defense last year, and they're not losing. I mean, they're losing some guys, but they're not losing everybody,
Right. I
you
mean,
know?
you're bringing back Jessen Renking, a defensive line. You're bringing back the other Fryer, Parker Fryer,
Mhm.
at
Ooh,
linebacker.
he's really good. And he was a freshman last year, wasn't he?
I want to say so. I made the joke with Matt McCarty. One of these days he's gonna run out of Fryers, and one of these days he's gonna run out of Mosiers.
But
And I don't
not
know what he's
anytime
gonna.
soon.
I don't know what he's gonna do at that point, because it's been Mosiers and Fryers that have just absolutely starred for Northwestern for the past, seems like, 5 years.
Mhm.
Noah Van Hoff and their defensive secondary was really good a year ago. Cole Telford had a kick return touchdown, also played defensive back. Jaden Snyder over here almost getting 40 yards per punt, but yet he's also picking off 8 dadgum passes.
Versatile is what we
Versatile.
like to see. Yeah.
Versatile. Okay, so you do lose Brett Mosier. I told you they're running out of the Mosiers. Um, but that's about it defensively.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, we talked about Dort, maybe can they take another step? This is your first big roadblock. Can you
Yeah.
beat Northwestern?
And that's not an easy task.
It's
They've
a
come
tall order.
close.
Yeah.
They've come closer. They've inched closer to it, but if you really want to send a message, if you're Dort this year, you got to find a way to beat Northwestern.
Absolutely. That or
Have to.
Morningside, which both of those
Oh,
are easier said than done.
yeah. But I think it's just hard to tell because both those teams are they're just so good. I can't even say that like, oh, beating this one over the other is more doable. I don't know. I mean, every team's different. They match up differently, especially
Yeah.
with the offense that Dort runs. I don't know what defense does really well against them. It's who knows,
Yeah.
but got to be one of them.
You've got to be one of them. You've got to put your name on the map even more than you already
Yeah,
have. Now, we talked about Northwestern's offense, 6 2/3 yards per play. We talked about Dort's offense, 7.14 yards per play. But now we just get to ludicrous in Morningside.
ludicrous speed.
Ludicrous speed. That is the speed that Morningside plays their offense at.
That's how they're operating.
7.93 yards.
Pretty much 8.
Pretty much 8.
Pretty much
Almost every time they're snapping the ball, they're getting a first dadgum down. I mean, I can barely wrap my head around these numbers.
Yeah, it's absurd.
And they had a good defense. No.
Oh, yeah.
Not a good defense, a great defense.
Great defense, yeah.
To go along with it, 4.14 yards per play. What do you do about that differential?
I don't have an answer for you. They're just that good, man. Like I said, these teams, they reload, and they reload really well.
And it's not fair either. Because let's run down the list of who they have returning. Your 24th year senior, no, not really 24th year senior. 5th year senior, Joe Dolanchek, who almost threw for 5 bills last season.
I remember being in the the Twitter spaces right after I got done with that game and hearing him say that he's coming back for a 5th year, and in the back of my head, I'm just like, oh joy, that's so good. That's so fun for everybody else.
and I gotta give his dad a shout out while we talk about him. Frank Dolanchek is amazing. One of our an absolute friend of NAIAFBALL. And a joy to have around, and I just look forward to seeing his comments everywhere because they're fantastic.
Yeah.
So you bring back your all-universe quarterback. You bring back Zach Norton with 952 yards and 6 touchdowns. You bring back Caleb Schweiger with 895 yards, 5 touchdowns, and 2 daggum punt return touchdowns. You bring back Sione Tuifua, who is a great blocker and caught 5 touchdown passes. You have an all-conference lineman who's coming back.
Which by the way, he was incredible in that semifinal game. Holy cow. Made a really nice catch towards the back of the end zone, I think. Kid's an athlete.
I've got my eyes on him. I can't remember exactly how big he is, but
he's massive.
That kid I don't know about the NFL, but that kid can probably find someone to pick him up to play professional ball.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised.
The only couple pieces you're missing from that offense is going to be Anthony Sims and Reed Juergensmeyer.
Yeah.
And a couple of offensive linemen.
You still have a lot of returning production, and then that's taking out Sims and Juergensmeyer, which, like, if you put them in with all the other names returning, it kind of blows my mind how that many guys can have those good of numbers. Like, I don't know how you pull that off.
Yeah.
But
there's only one football here.
Exactly. You look at these numbers and you wouldn't think so.
It's like they've got 3 or 4 out there. I'm seeing if I can find
which for reference, Sims and Juergensmeyer both had over 1,600 yards rushing for Sims and receiving for Juergensmeyer. And that is taking them out of the equation of a 900-yard receiver, another 900-yard receiver, another almost 900-yard receiver, etc.
And so for Morningside, Juergensmeyer, for this run that they've had, has kind of been that steady Eddie. Caught a touchdown pass in in all 3 national championship games that they've been in. And Sims takes over for AP, Anthony Ponder, and just does incredible.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm looking at this and looking at the score of the national championship, Grandview holds Morningside under 40.
Which is really impressive.
How good was Grandview's daggum defense to do that? And that was a game into the final quarter of play. You know, a 28-28 game going into the final quarter.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So let's talk about their defense, because their offense gets a lot of love. And their defense, they're returning just so many pieces. It's just like the offense. It's not fair. Weston Schultz at defensive line, 54 tackles, 3 forced fumbles, 6 pass breakups. Jalen Portis, 76 tackles, 12.5 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks, 3 forced fumbles. Cooper Von Seegren is in there, and why I don't have stats for him, I don't know. But Lonell Boyd, 72 tackles, 3 interceptions, 7 pass breakups. Jamal Jones, 38 tackles, 2 interceptions, 10 pass breakups. Drew Bessie, 45 tackles, 2 interceptions, 10 pass breakups. How do you offense? How do you offense against this?
I mean, there are teams that have found a way, but the teams that have found a way are also the ones who have insane offenses similar to Morningside's. So, and
even Northwestern last year in the playoffs, that game was like, I don't think either team made the 20s in that game. It was
neither team made. I think it was 29-17 was the final score, if I remember correctly.
Which we were expecting like 54-48 here.
Yeah. The game's like flip-flopped because Grandview and Lindsey Wilson had a super high-scoring game.
Now, the one thing that you are going to miss on that defense, and we talked earlier about Midland, and no, what Midland either.
Was it Doan?
Was it Doan?
Linebackers?
Yeah, it was a linebacker. Yeah. So we talked earlier about Concordia and Lane Napier and his 134 tackles, and we sit here and we go, 134 tackles. Well, then you've got Tyler Wingert with 150 freaking 1. I mean, 19.5 tackles for a loss, 6.5 stats, 3 interceptions, 4 pass breakups, and the man didn't even start until last year.
Yeah.
We talked to the folks over there. We talked, and Tyler Wingert was just a kid that waited his turn, and got in and did incredible things, because they had a couple of great linebackers over there before them, twins that played linebacker. Yeah, there's got to be something about twins playing linebacker there, and man, you're gonna have to plug that hole. That's a big one, but like you said, this is Morningside. They're not going to be plugging for long. It's going to be done plugged. So, as we come to the end of this, I think my pick has got to be pretty clear. Morningside, the question with them is not their talent. It's, are they going to have the drive to do it again? It's going to be one of want to.
Yep.
We know Northwestern's going to have the want to. They've still got to get over that hump. Well, Morningside have the want to, and I think talking to their folks over there, I think they are. And so to me, I'm definitely taking Morningside. They're going to put up insane numbers. They might break some records over here this year.
I mean, when are they never in question to do so? I feel like that's been the conversation for like 5+ years now.
Granted, in 2020, It was Northwestern in the national championship
It's
game.
true. Yes, very, very true. But it took Morningside till the semifinals to break. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that
So
insane winning streak.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, no, I want to agree, but I'm kind of a homer, Corey. But if I were a betting man, which I'm not, because betting on my own games is not good, and I shouldn't do it, and I won't do it.
Besides, where are you
Um,
going to find someone who's going to take NAI prop bets?
yeah, they
They
apparently they
exist. They
exist,
do
which
exist.
I didn't know they did until this year when somebody told me about them. I'm like, you're kidding, right? Like, there's no way that's real. But point aside, a, a bookie that probably a little shady taking these games, but Morningside has to be. I'm
It's
not going
got
to
to
say
be.
I'm admitting it. Um, I'm not going to say I'm admitting it because if my head coach watches this, I got to save face somehow, right? Um, but yeah, I mean they're the clear cut favorite. Even with Northwestern and Dort on the streaks that they're on and the way that they look, there's Morningside still at the top of the mountain. It's and those guys are close, but Morningside's still at the tip top.
And I'll let you have your dark horse there. I'll let you go ahead on that one.
Dakota Wesleyan
Okay.
University.
I'll let you save face there. I'll let you save
Yeah,
face there.
yeah. Of course, I'm gonna pick Dakota Wesleyan University. In all seriousness, I do. I like the talent we got this year. I like that I'm gonna be a part of it since I'm not hurt anymore.
Woohoo.
Um, and we'll see what we can do. I'm actually really excited to get on the field with those guys and see what happens. If I had to make another pick, because I'm being fair here, I would pick Jamestown for the
Yeah.
dark horse, and I think you'd agree with me on that
Yeah.
one.
Oh, I 100% will. I kind of have a sneaking suspicion that Jamestown's going to actually get to 500 this year.
I don't think that's impossible. That crazier things have happened. Have you
Crazier
seen
things
this
have happened.
conference?
Now let's be honest. We'll see it early because guess who plays the first game of the year? It's
Jamestown and Valley City
it's
State.
Jamestown and Valley City State for the paint bucket.
Hmm.
So we'll get to see there because Valley City State is kind of your two team in the
The
North
North Star.
Star. So and
Yeah.
Jamestown stuck around for a half last year, and played them tough for a half.
Hmm.
Can they play them tough for an entire game? Can they get over the hump and take back the paint bucket? That's going to be I think to me, the bellwether on what Jamestown is this year. If they can take the paint bucket, then the rest of the GPAC better be watching out for them orange helmets because they'll be coming for them next.
Hmm. Also, side note, I think on the same day because they play on August 25th, right? That's a Thursday.
Yeah,
Pretty sure.
I'm fairly certain they do. They play on a Thursday.
Another GPAC North Star matchup, same day, by the way.
Ooh.
Dakota State, Dakota Wesleyan in
Oh, now
Madison.
that's a grudge match right there.
Oh yeah. So take your pick. Personally, I think the Madison game's gonna be more fun, but that's just me, and I'm biased. So, you know,
I'll have my eye on both games, obviously.
yeah, yeah, of course. I think CFB Campus Tours is actually going to Madison for that one.
Oh, that'll be fun.
Yeah,
I
he
love
actually
seeing
told
them.
me like, oh, I don't know if I should say anything. I don't know if that's spoiling anything, but oh well. If you're listening, you heard it here first. Go say hi to him
Absolutely,
at Madison if
we
you're
got
there.
the scoop. Yeah, and getting him out to some of these NAI games, CFP Campus Tours is seriously good people, and getting him
Oh
out
yeah.
taking pictures of these games and talking about the atmosphere is such a good thing for the NAIA. You're talking about a guy who, yes, has a small follower fan base on Twitter, only about 6,000 followers, but man, everyone kind of seems to know him.
I saw him at the Montana State game last
The
year.
man gets around, dude.
He's everywhere.
So
Yeah.
so he
I
he
don't know, Corey.
actually he actually quit his regular job this summer.
That's what he was telling me something about that when I talked to him in Montana.
So
Yeah.
putting it all in on football, and that's what I wish I could do. But here I am
Here
getting
we
ready
are.
for work tomorrow. So, all right.
Uh,
Well, it has been. I don't know how long this is going to be after I edit it down, but we've gone for a little over an hour. So if you're still with us
yeah.
after probably almost an hour of football talk from the GPAC, God bless you. Um, and you're really the hardcore. Y'all the real MVPs out there if you've listened to this entire thing. But
Yeah.
for John Cooper and Matt Schwartzler, we are signing off, and we will see y'all later. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the NAIF Ball podcast presented by AdCraft USA. Be sure to contact them for all your custom apparel, merch, and uniform needs. Thanks also to Mommy Bay Turf and Turf Nation, as well as Leading Edge Fundraising for their support of the podcast. If you enjoy the show, subscribe to the podcast as well as to our YouTube channel. Leave us a review if you're listening on Apple Podcasts. As always, if you'd like to support what we do, head over to patreon.com/NAIAFBALL and become a patron. We can't do what we do without our sponsors and listeners like you.